Hello sports fans, welcome to Super Sports Central. Today, we're going to be going over my Week 4 UFL power rankings. So we'll start off by briefly recapping what happened in Week 3. So we saw the Storm beat the Kings 29-27, the Defenders destroyed the Gamblers 45-7, the Renegades beat the Aviators 28-23, and finally the Battlehawks beat the Stallions 34-30. But getting into this week's rankings, beating things at number 8, I've got the Kings. So the Kings, they've remained at number 8, after they lost to the Storm by a score of 29-27 in overtime. But this was a game the Kings definitely could have won, and really they only lost this game because of the dumbest rule ever created, because they committed 2 defensive penalties in overtime, and for whatever reason, that gave the Storm an automatic conversion, which won the game. But I thought the Kings, they played fairly well, and they really got the offense going. Now the offense wasn't great in the first half, but they were much better in the second half, with 21 of their 27 points getting scored in the second half. And I think they really did a great job of letting quarterback Jason Bean play to his strengths, because in the second half, they did a good job of letting him throw the ball deep downfield and really avoiding that short underneath stuff, because for some reason, he can't throw a 5-yard slant route, but when throwing 20-plus yards down the field, it's just dime after dime after dime. But Jason Bean, he ended up playing a great game, throwing for 352 yards and 3 touchdowns, and 2 of those actually went to tight end Zach Davidson. And the receiver Isaiah Winstead also had a nice game, catching 7 passes for 114 yards. Now, the run game still wasn't amazing for the Kings, but they ran for 63 yards, and I think they ran the ball the most effectively they have all year, so that's definitely a step in the right direction. Now, the defense for the Kings wasn't amazing, allowing 29 points, but they did get a couple big stops late in the game to really allow them to tie the game and force overtime. But the Kings, they are now 0-3, but I definitely think they're headed in the right direction. Jason Bean has answered all their questions at quarterback. He's their guy moving forward, and I think this is a team that could be dangerous moving forward, but after the loss, they are now 0-3, and I do have them at number 8. 7th, I've got the Aviators. The Aviators, they stay at number 7 after they lost to the Renegades by a score of 28-23. And this was not a great game for the Aviators, but I also don't think they played their worst game, and they only lost by 5. Now, the offense wasn't great, but wasn't terrible, so they scored 23 points. Quarterback Jalen McClendon was okay, throwing for 230 yards and 2 touchdowns, but he also threw 2 interceptions, one of them being a pick 6. And then on the ground, they also weren't that great, running for 74 yards and a touchdown. Now, defensively for the Aviators, they actually were a little bit better than I expected, because I thought they would get absolutely destroyed, because they were the worst defense in the league against the best offense, but they really only allowed 21 offensive points, because obviously they threw the pick 6. Now, obviously the defense still wasn't amazing, but considering how bad they were in the first 2 weeks, it was definitely a lot better than I expected them to play. But the Aviators, they did lose, they are still 0-3, and like the Kings, I do think they could be headed in the right direction, but as of now, they still don't have a win on the season. Now, you could definitely make the argument you should have the Kings over the Aviators and have the Aviators 8, Kings 7, but I'm just going to keep it how I had it last week because both teams are 0-3, so I really don't think there's a huge difference. Number 6, I've got the Houston Gamblers. The Gamblers, they check in at number 6 after they got absolutely destroyed by the Defenders, losing 45-7. And this was a terrible game for the Gamblers. They were not good. The offense was bad with just 7 points, and they started Talia Tagovailoa at quarterback, and he was not good in his UFL debut, completing just half his passes for 171 yards, a touchdown, and an interception. And the run game also was not very good. Then the defense was terrible, as they allowed 45 points and couldn't stop the run. But this was a terrible all-around game for the Gamblers, and it's actually insane how this team was able to beat the Stallions last week, and then now in week 3 they lose by 38 points, which is actually the biggest blowout in league history. But the Gamblers, they were not good. Really, the only reason I don't have them even lower is because they do have 1 win on the year, whereas the Aviators and Kings don't have that. But the Gamblers, they were terrible, and after the loss, I've got them at number 6. 5th, I've got the Stallions. So the Stallions, they dropped to number 5 after they lost to the Battlehawks by a score of 34-30. And this was not a great loss for the Stallions, because they were up by 10 at 2 different times in the 4th quarter. As they were up 23-13 at the start of the 4th, and then 4 minutes later, they were up 30-20. And they still lost this game, so that's definitely not great. Now, the good news for the Stallions in this game is they finally got the offense going, as they scored 30 points, which is almost as much as they scored in the first 2 games combined, as they'd scored 35 in the first 2 weeks. But the offense actually didn't get off to a great start, as Matt Corral threw 2 early interceptions, one of them being a pick 6, but he ended up having a pretty good game, throwing for 252 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 2 interceptions. And then wide receiver Deion Kane was also great, with 3 catches for 116 yards, and he found the end zone. Now, the run game for the Stallions still wasn't great, with just 65 yards on 3 yards per carry, but the offense was still pretty good. And the Stallions, they also did turn the ball over 3 times. All of them actually came in the first half, but despite the turnovers, the offense still scored 30 points. So obviously you don't want to be turning the ball over 3 times a game, but all things considered, I do think this was a good sign for the Stallions offense, and this could be a positive sign moving forward. Now, the defense for the Stallions, they weren't so good, as they allowed 34 points, 21 of them came in the final quarter, and they just couldn't get a stop away in the game. But not a great performance for the Stallions. They've now lost back-to-back games. They're 1-2 on the season, and number 5 in my power rankings. Coming in at number 4, I've got the Battlehawks. So the Battlehawks, they're at number 4 after they beat the Stallions, obviously 34-30. And this is a big game for the Battlehawks because, like the Stallions, they finally got the offense going, as they scored 34 points. Now, the offense actually was not great, as they got off to a pretty slow start, and at halftime, they scored just 6 offensive points. But then at halftime, they made the quarterback switch, benching Brandon Silvers and putting in Harrison Frost. And he actually got off to a terrible start, as his first 2 passes were both intercepted. But after that, he settled in, and he played really well, going 9 for 13 with 148 yards and 3 second-half touchdown passes. And he definitely looks like he's the answer at quarterback for the Battlehawks, and he played really well. And then the defense for the Battlehawks was also pretty good. Now, you might be thinking they allowed 30 points, how good could they really have been? But they forced 3 turnovers, returned 1 of them for a touchdown, and they got some huge stops late in the 4th quarter. But this is a huge win for the Battlehawks. If Michael Frost can continue to play well, and play at a high level and this offense can put up points, this team's going to be really good with how good their defense is. But the Battlehawks, they're now 2-1, and after the win, I've got them at number 4. Third, I've got the DC Defenders. So the Defenders, they're in at number 3 after they destroyed the Gamblers, winning 45-7. And this was a great all-around win for the Defenders. They got off to a great start as they were up 11-0 at the end of the first quarter, and they're up 28-0 at the half. And overall, this is a very easy win. The offense was great once again, as they scored over 40 points for the second week in a row. As week 2 they scored 44, this week they scored 45. And it's another game where they dominated on the ground, as they ran for 163 yards and 3 touchdowns on 6 yards per carry. And then defensively, they also dominated, as they allowed just 7 points, got 4 sacks, forced 2 turnovers, and returned 1 of them for a touchdown. But this is a dominant game for the Defenders. As I mentioned before when I was talking about the Gamblers, this is the largest blowout in week history. And after back-to-back wins for the Defenders, they're now 2-1, and I've got them at number 3 in my power rankings. Second, I've got the Storm. The Storm remains at number 2 after they beat the Kings by a score of 29-27 in overtime, and they remain undefeated. But the Storm, they're all like other teams around the league this week, as they finally got their offense really playing at a high level, as they scored a season-high 29 points, and quarterback Jack Palmer played pretty well, as he threw for 250 yards and 3 scores. And wide receiver Chris Rowland also had a great game with 9 catches for 113 yards, and he found the end zone. Now, the run game for the Storm wasn't amazing, as they only ran for 73 yards, but the offense still put up some points. Then defensively for the Storm, I really don't think they played that well, as they allowed 27 points, and they got absolutely torched through the air. But they still did enough to get the win. The Storm, they're 3-0 on the season, and I've got them at number 2. Now, I do think you could make the argument to have the Defenders at 2, the Storm at 3, considering the Defenders have just dominated over the past couple weeks, and the Storm haven't been the most impressive 3-0 team, but I'm still going to have the Storm over the Defenders because they are still undefeated. So I've got the Storm 2, Defenders 3. But remaining at number 1, I've got the Dallas Renegades. So the Renegades, they stay at number 1 as they stayed undefeated and beat the Aviators by a score of 28-23. Now, I don't think they played their best game, and they took a minute to really get going in this game, but they still played pretty well. Now, the offense, they scored points, although they didn't put up huge numbers, but they were still good. As quarterback Austin Reed still threw 2 touchdown passes, and they were good on the ground, with 4.6 yards per carry and a touchdown. And then the defense, they were also pretty good, allowing 23 points, forcing 2 turnovers, with 1 of them being a pick 6. But another win for the Renegades. I don't really think they played anywhere close to their best game. They still won, and they're now 3-0 on the season, and they've remained at number 1 in my power rankings. But those are my week 4 UFL power rankings. Thank you guys for watching. Be sure to like the video, subscribe, turn on notifications. I do my best to post as often as possible, and I will see you in the next video.